So let's get into some strategies here. I have some short-term strategies to offer, and then we'll have a few long-term strategies to take a look at. The essential note here is that we need more than self-care. While all of these do constitute self-care, I want to just acknowledge that a lot of the articles out there right now about burnout, about quiet quitting, while are well intentioned, they are not responsibly getting into any of the underlying psychology or psychological warfare that exists to cause burnout, as well as how it is so integrated into the infrastructure of how we typically work that there's very little that we can do as people to help get us out of that bad situation, to help pull us out of that burnout feeling. So I do want us to get into some concrete strategies with the eye of looking towards that long term, let's get you out of that situation. So, um, deaccession as much as possible. To use a term familiar in archives and museums world, deaccession is the intentional removal of items from a collection because it is not a thematic fit to the collecting policy. And so what I am proposing here is that you treat your life like that as well. And in a work setting in particular, because we are given so much more work than it is just our job, I am suggesting that you deaccession as much as possible off of your plate, off of your responsibility list, especially in that work setting. Next, build rock hard boundaries. This takes practice, but building up boundaries to help protect you from or insulate you from a lot of the toxic behaviors that could be happening in your workplace. And this can definitely require the help of a therapist in terms of recognizing where boundaries should be and what they should look like. So if you need help around that, I definitely recommend a mental health therapist. Next one, continue being awesome at your job, but only perform your actual and within reason duties. So perhaps contrary to that quiet quitting phenomenon, the point is you can still be good at your job, you can still care about your job, but I want you to pull back a little bit with that deaccessioning, with that buildup of boundaries, and re-examine and recommit to what actually makes sense for your job. What is it on paper for your position description? And because so many of our position descriptions can be ridiculous and be 3 jobs worth, I want you to pare it down to what one FTE can cover. With your one FTE's worth of time, what activities and responsibilities is reasonable for you to take on? And I want you to make that an intentional decision, and I recommend further that you actually communicate that decision to your boss, whether or not they're supportive. I hope that you're in the supportive boss camp, but I know too many of us have been in the other camp. Next one, find pockets of support in or adjacent to your department. So I had mentioned that you can have as supportive partner, friends, family, but they unfortunately can only go so far, especially with this particular uh, um, threat, essentially with burnout. You also need support in your work environment. And so sometimes that can look like fellow colleagues in your department. Sometimes that can look like a colleague that's in a different department or a mentor in the field. And sometimes that can look like colleagues who are in the field but not in your organization at all, but is a friendly ear and is at least aware of some of the complete dysfunction that is happening in the field in general. Also, know your options for short-term relief. So sick time, days off, if you have those benefits available to you, making sure that you are taking those and spreading them out in ways to provide you regular and quite periodic relief. Sometimes this can look like you take every Friday off in the summer, for example, or perhaps you save it all up because you just need to take 2 full weeks off from being at your job. So, whichever works best for your brain and body, use the bit of tools or benefits you have available to put in those short-term relief areas. Next one, cultivate resilience with deep rest, therapy, and restorative activities. Specifically, what I mean by this one, and to share more of my own personal experience, my therapist framed it in regard to there is the typical adage of work hard, play hard, and we're all too exhausted to play hard. So, what it should really be is if you are working hard, then you should be resting hard. And so, the concept of what does hard rest or deep rest look like? Because rest is what our bodies and minds need when going through burnout. So, as much as you can, cultivating and providing yourself that space for sleep or just not work activities. Mental health therapy, absolutely. I have benefited so much from going to mental health therapy in so many regards, but in particular for this issue, the burnout issue, knowing that it can lead to anxiety and depression, autoimmune diseases, chronic pain, and even to suicidal thoughts, it is so important that you have a medical health professional who can help you navigate quite a bit of at least the mental and emotional component of that. And the idea of restorative activities. So, again, it's not play hard. If you have the energy and want to play hard, like by all means, I'm not saying don't do that, but it is so important that you're doing that rest and that restorative activity. And so, for me, and with my things going on, and with my particular brand of anxiety and neurodivergence, I need to have activities that are mindless, but that keep my hands busy. Otherwise, my hands want to do self-harm. And so when I rest, my brain has a hard time being in rest mode, and that's where it goes. It goes to self-harm, which I am working on. And so having activities for me, that looks like things that keep my hands busy and my brain at least engaged enough passively that it's going to short circuit that anxiety trigger. So it looks like puzzles. I'm not a huge fan of puzzles, and yet I'm doing a lot of them. It looks like paint by numbers. I am not an artist, but I can do paint by numbers. Keeping my hands busy and using my brain just enough to short circuit that anxiety so that I can actually get rest. And finally, start to build yourself an off ramp. You need an escape plan. In order for any of these short term strategies to be as effective, you do have to eventually get the heck out of where you are. So start to think about what that looks like, start working towards that, whether that's an investment in yourself, applying for other jobs, getting out of the field entirely. Build that off ramp for yourself. So just to underscore again, in order for short-term relief efforts to have maximum impact, you have to have the end in sight.